What is up, y'all? Welcome to another episode of FitBizU. I'm your host, Jill Coleman, and it is, if you're listening to this episode on the day that it drops, it is Monday, January 19th. We are opening enrollment for waitlisters into FBA 1 week from today. So a week from today on, I think that's the 26th. Yeah, 26th. We're opening doors for enrollment for waitlisters. So if you are not on the interest list for FBA and you're interested in those details, you can go to the link in the show notes, or you can go to jillfitfree.com/FBA-waitlist. FBA stands for Fitness Business Accelerator. It's my intro to online business program where I walk you through exactly all of the moving parts of online coaching and how to get this thing up and running. And also, if you already have a business or you've been trying to do your own online coaching for at least a couple of years, how to grow it and maybe get out of a little bit of a rut if you're in one. So there's no obligation to be on the list, but we are going to be opening enrollment for 4 days just to people on the interest list with a discount and some exclusive bonuses. All right. So today's episode is actually sort of related. Today's episode is actually a question that I got in a recent question box that I posted on social media. Thank you guys for always being so responsive in those boxes when I ask for your feedback, because your girl likes to know what's going on. And of course, I love answering any business questions you guys have. It's one of my favorite things. So this question came in and she asked about imposter syndrome. It was just imposter syndrome question mark. So I want to talk about this. We have other episodes on this, but I have a little bit of a different take today. And so I'm going to call this episode Understanding and Overcoming Imposter Syndrome. So understanding it, like what's actually going on. And then once we kind of understand it, how do we start making changes or taking different actions to overcome it? So thank you guys for this question. And the reason why it's sort of related to FBA is because I noticed that when people come into FBA, if they're newer to online coaching, maybe even if they've been an in-person coach, or maybe they've been a group fitness instructor, or maybe they're a movement professional, or they're a clinician or works with people in person, when they come online, they can get a hit of imposter syndrome even though they have worked with clients in person for maybe years or even decades. Sometimes when people come online, they have this hit of like, wow, this is all new to me. Am I good enough to do this? And I think it can be really intimidating when you are new to online business or online coaching and you kind of look around at social media and you look at people with these massive followings, with these, beautiful posts and, clever insights and people just sharing amazing takes. It can be really intimidating to be like, this is what I'm up against. Like, this is the thing that I'm trying to do. Like, little old me who's been a personal trainer for the last decade and, like, in my local gym, in my local area, it can feel really intimidating. And it can feel as though maybe there's either not enough room for you, or like, where do I fit in? Or these are the people I'm competing against. Why would anyone want to work with me when all of these other people who are super successful, been doing it for a long time, seemingly know a lot more than me? Why would they choose me? And so this is something we actually talk about quite a bit in FBA. And I do feel like this hit of imposter syndrome is specific to the beginning of your journey. And that's why FBA is so relevant, is because when I work with beginners to online business, I would say probably like 50 to 60% of people who come into FBA are brand new, like brand new from scratch, don't even have a business account on social media, are getting started with this and not knowing where to begin. And when you're coming in, this is when you're most susceptible to a lot of the bigger mindset obstacles, things like imposter syndrome, comparing yourself to other people, maybe not feeling good enough. We have a lot of this sort of not good enough. Now, I've said this before in episodes. I really believe that as humans, especially women, we tend to just not feel good enough in general. We tend to doubt ourselves a lot more than potentially men do. Not all men, of course. But I do think that society kind of tells us, hey, like, you should be a little more humble, or maybe you shouldn't think so highly of yourself, or maybe you shouldn't be that confident, or you never know. And we kind of have this feeling of doubt. And so these are what I consider more beginner challenges to overcome. And I do see this in the first like 6 to 12 months of online. The reason why over time, 6 to 12 months, maybe you don't feel as much of an imposter is because you have done some stuff, right? And so when I talk to my FBA students, like 3 months into the program, I'll be like, could you imagine if you just didn't start posting 3 months ago, right? Or being consistent, or showing up for an audience, or getting some of your shitty rough drafts out of the way, how far behind you would feel. And they're like, I can't imagine it, because they've just taken so much action. And I want you guys to know that when we feel a hit of imposter syndrome, it is normal and it's also okay, because you haven't done this thing before. You guys have heard me say this before, that confidence and competency, by the way, is area specific. Meaning, I can know that I'm a great personal trainer. I have been training in the gym for years. I teach fitness classes. People love my classes. Like, I can know all of those things. But when I come online and I'm seemingly still doing coaching, still doing fitness stuff, but it's a different version, you don't feel confident in this new thing. And so you're going to feel a little bit like, am I good enough? Especially in the face of, accounts on social media with millions and hundreds of thousands of followers, you go like, could I really do all of the things that this person is doing? Now, I think we make a mistake in believing that we should be at that level. By the way, you guys, when I say this, everyone starts online with no followers, right? No one comes online with a shitload of followers. No one has any subscribers. No one has any readers. No one has any, clients. You have to get your first follower. You have to get your first subscriber. You have to get your first listener, your first reader, your first client. Everyone does. So if you look at that person who has hundreds of thousands of followers and tons of posts and they have this big body of work, realize that they started with a single post just like you. And so imposter syndrome is normal. It is okay because you do have, and this is true and there's nothing wrong with it, you have a lack of competency and confidence in that area because you have no reps yet. Why would you? There's no show of evidence that you are good yet in this specific thing. I wish that confidence translates, and oftentimes it doesn't. We can look at a certain area of our life and know that we're really good at that thing, but I'll guarantee you, if you're a personal trainer and you know you're a good trainer, think back to your first sessions. I know for me, I was like, I hope that I'm this person. I was making people puke all the time. Like I was just like terrible. I was a terrible trainer when I first started because I didn't understand it. I didn't have the depth of knowledge and the depth of mastery quite yet. But then a decade into personal training, I was like, I'm the best personal trainer in this town, in my area. I knew that without a doubt because of all the experience I had and because of the results I was giving my clients. So you have to create the show of evidence that you're good in this specific thing. So if you feel a hit of imposter syndrome online, understand that that's actually normal because you don't know if you're good yet. And like everything, there's only one way to start to get good at it. And you guys know this, it is to do it. And I'll never forget when I had my first online client. I'd been a personal trainer for a long time and I was pretty maxed out in person. This is when I was starting Jill Fit and I was also personal training. I was in the gym 70 hours a week and I didn't really have any time slots available. Someone reached out to me who was local. So this person was local, but they either couldn't come in at the specific times that I had available, or I was just maxed out to the point where, for whatever reason, it wasn't going to be an in-person client. And they said, hey, Jill, I don't really think I need online, like ongoing coaching, but if you could help me come up with a plan and write a program for me that I can do at home on my own. So it wasn't online coaching, but it was distance coaching, right? It was a distance client typically. So this was my first time. And I remember we were going to meet up and I was going to show them how to do the exercises. And they were going to come to the gym, one single session. I was going to show them, and I say them because it was a couple. And I remember I prepared for weeks. I didn't know. It was not like personal training. It wasn't like I could take them in and show them what to do. And I was right there counting their reps for them and adjusting their form. It was like they're going to do it on their own. And I remember having massive, massive imposter syndrome, feeling like, oh my God, do I even know what I'm doing? It took me weeks to put together a plan. I'm printing out stuff from like ace.com and like I'm printing out stuff from bodybuilding.com and all these kind of things, all these papers. And we met up and I thought for sure they were going to know they were my first client. Like I didn't tell them they were, but they're going to find out. I know that they're going to see it in my face. They're going to be able to point out the ways in which I'm not good at this. And I took them through the exercises and I was really nervous, but I was like, okay, here's what you're going to do and whatever. And here's the program, whatever. And I remember at the end of the session, they were just like, thanks so much, Jill. That was great. And then they left. And I remember thinking to myself, just like a huge exhale, but also I couldn't believe it. I was like, all of that anxiety for nothing. They didn't point out the ways in which I was doing it wrong. They didn't call me out on my stuff. They believed me. They trusted me. And then they just left happy. Wow. And so that was my first client. I was for sure. I thought they would definitely know that they were my first client and they didn't. And so there is this feeling of they're certainly going to find out. I mean, that's what it is, right? When we say imposter syndrome, they're going to know that I don't know my shit. They're going to know that I'm a fraud. They're going to know that they're my first person. Now, I want to remind you guys that clients online don't know how it's supposed to go. They don't know how it's supposed to go. So with my first client, when I showed them the exercises, they weren't trying, they were on my team. They weren't trying to find out ways that I wasn't good. They weren't like, oh, there's something, right? They weren't looking for ways in which I was not good. They already trusted me. They're already on my team. Otherwise, they wouldn't have hired me. And so you have to remember that if someone is following you on social media, if someone's reading your posts, if someone's consuming your stuff, if someone is asking you to write them a program, if someone is hiring you, they already trust you. So trust them, right? You've already shown a level of competency. You've already shown a level of competence or confidence to the point where they wanted to interact with you anyway. You have to trust that interaction. And oftentimes I think about imposter syndrome, like, what are we really scared of, right? It's this feeling of I'm not good enough, or people are going to find me out, or I'll be embarrassed, I'll be a failure, I'll get called out on my shit. I don't know. It's one of these versions, right? And it will also maybe confirm that I'm not good enough. And under the hood, I kind of feel like that anyway. Like I said, I think it's the human condition to not feel good enough. And so when we post something and then we have potentially someone in our comment section or someone reaches out and questions us or calls us out on the science or is just maybe a troll or a hater or some kind of feedback or pushback, we feel really emotional about it or get a little emo because we go, see, I knew it. I knew I wasn't good enough, right? We're almost waiting and watching and looking for evidence that we're not good enough. And this is where I do think that we can kind of get in trouble because we'd only be worried about being called out if there was one right or an only way to do something. So if we're like, I'm going to call it, I'm like, what is imposter? And imposter is like this fear of people are going to find me out. They're going to know I'm not good. And we'd only be scared of that call out if there was a one right only way to do something. But remember, there are a million ways to coach someone, to train someone. There's different ideologies when it comes to fitness and nutrition, different opinions, different philosophies. There's multiple ways to be an expert. And let's say you're new. And so you're like, well, Jill, I don't know if I'm an expert. I'm brand new to this. I don't even know, I don't really know if I can help somebody. I don't really have a depth of expertise. Maybe you just have your own story. Maybe you have your own transformation. You have what worked for you. Here's the deal, y'all. Your story is always true. What worked for you is always true. What worked for you can never be wrong. It can never be wrong for you. So if you start out on social media and you say, hey, here's what worked for me. If someone comes in and is like, that's not correct or that's the wrong thing, you could be like, well, it can't be wrong because it did work for me, right? Your truth is your truth is your truth. Now we can have the conversation about, should you extrapolate what worked for you to every single person on earth? Probably not. But when you're getting started and you only have your own transformation, your own experience to pull from, that's where you have to start. You have to just tell stories. You have to tell your own story. And by the way, everyone starts in that place. The reason why I even got into something like Moderation 365, or even before that, I was a competition coach, was because I did it myself. I dieted down for multiple shows. I got in show shape. I got up on stage. I won trophies. I did all of those things. So I go, you know what? I'm going to just share what I did. And over time, you start to have more experiences. And over time, you start to see that what worked for you doesn't work for everybody. But you can't know that until you get started, right? You can't know that until you start training people. Now, this brings me to what I consider to be two different levels of expert. We have a level 1 expert and a level 2 expert. A level 1 expert is someone who is credible, but kind of just maybe regurgitates what they learned from a certification or what they learned from someone else, or maybe their own experience. You're still an expert, by the way. I said level 1 expert. You're still an expert. This is where everyone starts. We all learn from somebody. We all learn from our own experience. We all have our own maybe story of transformation. We all have our own reps. And so when you get started online, you're either probably going to be sharing the things you learned in a certification like Moderation 365, or maybe you did a IIN, or maybe you did a menopause cert, or maybe you did some kind of functional testing cert, or whatever. You have some kind of certification. So when you share stuff, expert content or solutions posts online, you're going to start there. All of us do that. I would share a lot of things from my mentor because that was who I was reading and who I was learning from and who I was having conversations with. And I would also teach from my own experience because that was what worked for me. And then at some point, you start to have enough experiences and you start to notice that you have clients or you have client experiences or you work with people the thing you learn doesn't work for them, or your things that work for you didn't work for them. And you start to adjust your approach based on having a lot more client contacts. This is where you're building your body of work. This is where you're building your clinical reps. And over time, you start to see, okay, yes, I need to adjust my approach based on this person because the things I was teaching don't necessarily work for this person. And over time, that's how you start to become what we call a level 2 expert. A level 2 expert is now someone who has their own intellectual property, their own system, their own method, their own thing that potentially someone else could learn. So this is how Moderation 365 came about. I've told this story before. Like I came in as a competition coach. I would teach people how to get super lean and get up on stage. And what I started to notice in myself and my clients was that like they would do these shows and then they would just binge, right? They'd rebound, they'd gain all the weight back, and we could have the conversations, but we were up against a physiology that wanted to eat. And I was noticing it myself. I'd put myself on these meal plans and I couldn't stay on them. And I started to be like, all right, this isn't working the way it worked the first couple of times. And does it just mean I suck and that I'm weak? Or is there a middle ground here somewhere? And I remember saying to myself, like, Jill, if you really want to figure this out and eat healthy forever and like figure out a way to not like binge and deprive constantly, you're going to have to figure out moderate eating. I don't know what that looks like. I don't even know what to buy at the grocery store. But over time, I started making small changes and taking small actions to what we call, navigate the middle of eating. So it wasn't competition prep dieting, but it also wasn't going off the rails and eating with abandon. It was somewhere in the middle. And I started these actions. And these actions turned into tools, and the tools turned into teachable strategies that I could teach other people. And I started teaching more B2C, like end user. I started teaching clients how to do moderation and mindfulness. And then after many years of teaching moderation and mindfulness to directly to the consumer, the end user, I started teaching coaches. And now we have the Moderation 365 certification. So now it's a level 2 expertise. So you will get there eventually. But the only way to get better and to feel more confident in the things that you're doing is to create a show of evidence and get started with small, uncomfortable actions. And then you have to trust the evidence. When I had that first distance client and they left and they were like, thanks, Jill. Thanks so much, Jill. That was awesome. I had to trust that they were happy. I had to trust that they weren't leaving being like, can you believe her? She thinks she's an expert at this, right? Like I had to trust what they said. And over time, when you take on a beta client or you take on your very first client, you say yes to somebody, or maybe you train people for free. And over time, you start to notice and create evidence that number one, you survived it. Like you did it and they were happy and no one reprimanded you and no one called you out. No one told you were wrong and they're getting a result. You have to then believe the evidence, right? But it starts with one uncomfortable action. You putting yourself out there. That's why I love FBA, because FBA is like, you cannot be in an environment like FBA and not take massive action. Like that's what we do. And if you know anything about me, as you guys do, like if you're someone who is scared to put yourself out there, I think something like FBA is the best way to get started because you're automatically in a support group of people just like you who are trying to do what you're doing. So when I come into FBA, it's not like there's people that are already making six figures and who are like, hey, I can't believe you're bad at this. It's like, no, all of us are in the same boat. We're all doing it together. And you can't be in a group of people talking about things and learning business without taking action, without taking massive action, and then having a soft place to land, right? So you post and then you're like, oh my God, I did it. And then you come to the group and you're like, I did it. And then people liked it. And then like people shared it and that was amazing. Or you post some stuff and you get a hater, you get a troll. And then you come to the group and you're like, I got my first hater. What do I do? Or someone DMs you and says, hey, I'd love to coach with you. And then you come into the group and you're like, I got a first client. What do I do with them? Having a soft place to land with all of these new small actions to build your business is amazing. And I wish that something like FBA existed when I was getting started, because I was getting started and I was kind of on my own. And I was like, I don't really know if I'm doing this right. I don't really know how to handle a troll or a hater. I don't know if I'm good at this. And believe me, I got a lot of hate at the beginning, especially because I was new and and I also think there was a level of energy I was putting out that I was available for critique. Now I don't really have that energy anymore. And also I'm a lot more confident. I'm a lot more competent. So you have to post and then you wait. You have to maybe train someone for free or a group of people for free. Maybe you get some beta test clients and you just be really honest with them. Hey, you guys, I'm like, you're my first clients. You're going to give me feedback. In exchange for that, I'm going to train you for free or you're going to get some sort of steep discount. I'm going to create a freebie. I always think putting a freebie out there, like a free PDF or download or e-course, is a great place to start because it's so low stakes. So you have to practice selling, quote, selling your freebie, right? Even though it's free, you still have to sell it. So it's a great way to get reps without feeling like it's attached to money. Because forever, even when we attach money to it, now the stakes feel higher, right? There's more responsibility and accountability. And so all of that to say, I wish that there was some secret, special formula, mantra, morning affirmation you could use to overcome imposter syndrome. But I'm going to tell you what you already know, which is confidence and competency comes from risk and action. It doesn't come from thinking about it more. It doesn't even come from listening to a podcast like this. Because here's the deal. You can listen to this podcast right now and you're like, maybe you're nodding along like, yeah, that makes sense, right? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? Intellectually, we get it. What I'm saying makes sense to you. The problem is it's not going to be experiential for you. And you're not going to get and build the confidence and the competency you need to overcome imposter syndrome without getting out there and taking action. And so this goes to a couple episodes ago when I was kind of talking about this idea of, risk. I don't think that we get better when we can just stay comfortable. So I think asking yourself, if you made a whole list of actions that like, okay, my goal this year is to start my business. Okay, great. Guess what's not going to really move the needle? Reading business books, following business accounts, even listening to business podcasts. Y'all, I love that you guys listen to this, but this isn't moving the needle. This is giving you information, but it's not increasing, it's not putting you in the arena, right? It's not putting you out there and you're not having to stick your neck out and there's nothing to risk. So as much as I love manifestation work and journaling and exercises and all of these amazing things that we can do to change our mindset, I don't think that you really fortify your confidence and your competency until you put yourself out there in a way that is uncomfortable, that does feel risky. And when I say risky, I don't mean like you're going to go to jail if this goes wrong. I just mean like risky, like, hey, this is a new thing. And anytime you're doing something new, it's not going to be easy and it's certainly not going to feel comfortable. And so that's where I think if you truly want to overcome imposter syndrome, you can't, look in the mirror and say affirmations and journal about it and listen to podcasts about it and read books and follow accounts. I think having those things feels good, right? I love following business accounts where like I follow Hermosi and he says something. I'm like, yeah, exactly, right? Like we can relate, we can resonate. But I think that you're not going to see the needle actually move on some of your biggest mindset triggers until you start putting yourself out there and taking massive action, which of course is why FBA exists. A lot of times people come into FBA and they're like, I've been trying this thing for 2 years and I did more in the last 8 weeks than I have in the last 2 years, because we hold your hand through it. I promise you, this is going to be our 14th round of FBA. And I guarantee you, whatever your biggest fear is, obstacle, challenge, frustration, I have seen it not only once, twice, a million times. I've seen it. And we're going to do it together. So if you're not on the interest list, go and check the link in the show notes. This is your last opportunity to get on the list. And then we'll be off and running. So if you guys need anything or you have a question about maybe if you are, if this is the next best step for you, if this is right for you, if it's a good fit for you, feel free to reach out to the DMs at JillFit on social media. We can have a quick conversation. I will be 100% honest. If I don't think it's a good fit, I will let you know. And that's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for being here. As usual, your time and attention means everything. And I'll see you on the next episode.